So in this interview, we speak with Neil Davison. Neil Davison is a serial entrepreneur, many different businesses, many different industries, a guy with not just huge experience, but incredible energy and passion. And I think you'll see that comes across in the interview. His business is really diverse. He talks about his dad, who was the inventor of the Hoola-Hoop. I didn't know that. Neil is the inventor of what are called meat packs, or meat pads, I should say, which is a little piece of fiber material you see underneath your frozen chicken you get from your supermarkets. Neil invented that, along with many other things. We talk about cow udder wipes, and yes, a vast range of product ideas and businesses that Neil's had on his journey. I think you're involved or interested in business at any level, you're going to really enjoy this. That's it from me. Let's dive into the podcast. So here, Mr. Neil Davison, old buddy of mine, serial entrepreneur. So I'm going to be picking his brains a little bit on our call today. Actually, yeah, when our paths first crossed, Neil, you were the CEO, I can't remember the company's name, of an online video company where you'd basically increase conversions. You'd have walk-on videos. But I've since learned you've actually got, had your finger in many different pies over the years. So have you always been an entrepreneur, or did you have an orthodox kind of career beforehand?
Well, I was brought up, my dad invented the plastic hula-hoop.
No way.
In the early 60s. So I was brought up basically by my dad, who didn't really understand children. We're talking business and making business plans when I was about 6 years old. The first book he ever gave me, well, he gave me two. One was called The Man in the Grey Flannel Suit when I was 6, and How to Win Friends and Influence People when I was 8. I never had a teddy bear. I've now got one, but I didn't have one as a child. And so business was kind of an entrepreneurial stuff was in my sort of genes, really. And then I didn't bother to get the qualifications. I didn't get a proper training in anything. So I was forced to be an entrepreneur because I had no other skill to really use. So it was very much flying by the seat of my pants. And depending on where the wind was going on a particular day, I'd end up in another business. And there's a great similarity in businesses. It doesn't matter whether you're selling wing nuts or feature films. There's a basic similarity to how you actually build relationships, how you get distribution, what the mistakes you make that teach you lessons. They're the same, whatever business you're in. So I guess I've been involved in, 30 or 40 different businesses, all totally different. And a lot of them, funny enough, I'm very untechnical, but a lot of the businesses, like the video one which you mentioned, were very technical, but I always managed to find clever people who could support me in what the vision was. So that was my thing. And I've had failures as well as successes, by the way, and I probably got a lot more out of the failures than I did out of the successes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few of those as well, and although they can be painful, there usually is some reward in terms of learning and growth, personal growth, if you can dust it off a little bit to see those wins. I think they are there. So I'm really intrigued as to how do you pick something? I mean, I guess I feel that opportunities aren't a problem. I feel like the quantity of opportunities are the problem, usually. I mean, if you have a fairly healthy mindset where there are actually thousands of opportunities every day, how do you know which ones to grab hold of, which ones to let go? How do you navigate that?
Well, in my experience, the really successful people are the ones who have the patience to wait and let thousands of ideas pass them. And when they do find a really good one, they jump on it. So as soon as you're looking to try and find something to do or to make you money, you'll usually make the wrong choice. So wait and hold your horses until you find something that's really perfect for you. And for me, I consider myself to be the totally average Joe. So I've never sold anything that I wouldn't buy. Okay. So what I used to do with my brother was we used to invent backwards. So we'd come up with a design goal and say, well, if we had a product that this, and this, then we think we could sell oodles of them. So we then got clever technical people, sometimes universities or individual people, to do it technically, prove it was a possibility. And then, we'd start marketing it. So a lot of people fall in love with the idea, and no matter how many people tell them it's the wrong one or it's not going to work, they just believe, well, they're wrong, I'm right, and they just plow on regardless and end up losing their houses. So it's kind of wait until you find something that makes, with me, literally my fingers start tingling. When there's an idea which really excites me, I get a tingle in my fingers and I can't wait to get stuck on it. And so I suppose the biggest lesson that I could advise anyone is get a passion for it, but also stay real in terms of what applause are you getting from the outside world about your idea or your product or service. If you're not getting applause, you need to change it. And the most common mistake that I made was that I was developing the iPhone 6 before I got to the iPhone 1. So find an idea which in its basic context has something of merit, which people will buy, and then gradually develop it. Because with creatives, as soon as you have a good idea, then you want to add all sorts of bells and whistles, and that costs money, and you end up in a never-ending development project. And the customer gets confused because the product ends up so brilliant, no one can understand it. So you need to just take it step by step and finish one thing before you start another. I think that's possibly the biggest piece of advice I can give to anybody who's starting a business.
So in general, you're a fan of like MVP, minimum viable product, lean startup principles in general?
Oh, blimey, this is jargon I've never even read about, Simon. So I don't know what that means, but
okay.
Well,
that would be MVP and minimum viable product. So that would be creating, I guess the iPhone 1, not the iPhone 6, to use your language, and sometimes quite a crude version.
Well, you need something it needs to be good enough, obviously, to sell. It needs to be, you need to disrupt the marketplace with something. So it has to be disruptive, but the temptation is to go to the next step before you've already taken the last one. So
it's interesting to talk about having to be disruptive. Now, I know my background's in design, and I like to think of myself as a reasonably creative and innovative thinker.
Yes.
Get a lot of self-worth out of that element. But I do know other people which feel quite differently. They feel like, well, if no one else is already in that market with a similar-ish type product, then there's a lot of nervousness around that. Hasn't yet, well, that concept hasn't been proven. That's a big risk. And I know some other people like to be number two, if you like, to a market because there's some kind of qualification in that.
It's much easier to let someone else build the market first and then you jump on afterwards. But of course, the person who's there first has an enormous advantage. So it just depends. But another thing which springs to mind from what you just said is, I lecture on film, and one of my creative heroes is Walt Disney. And so all his other animators used to come up with ideas, and they were brilliant ideas, but they were never quite good enough for Walt Disney. He always had to push them and say, right, how can we raise it to another level? And it's the same thing when you're coming up with any product or service, is you'll get to a stage where you think that's really good. And then you naturally stop thinking about it and you stop at that level. And that's actually where you should start thinking. So how can you add very, very simple things that make it outstanding? So what can you add? These little tiny differences. So if you've got a hotel, for instance, how do you make your hotel different? Well, maybe you record on your computer what drink your customers like. So when they next come to the hotel as a regular, it's by their bedside at night. And they get a little thing under the door saying what the weather's going to be like and things they can do that day. A little bowl of nice looking fruit and stuff. So it costs nothing, but that tiny little bit of extra thought is the difference between being a winning racehorse and a losing racehorse. Yeah. And the winning racehorse is worth 100 times as much. Yeah. So if you start thinking once you've got to the level of great or good, and then add bells and add just simple things that make you stand out. And everything ultimately depends on relationships. So what happens most of the time is people get a good idea and they're selling immediately before they have a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so until I know you, like you, and trust you, I'm not going to buy anything from you. So the first thing to get if you want to build a business is to ask permission to build a relationship with the people you think you should be building relationships with. Once you have that, then you've got a ready-made business. It's a much stronger and firmer business. But because we're all so short of time, everyone's trying to sell, and we're becoming much more skeptical, much more jaundiced about people who want to take our money. So, but it's forcing people to try and sell immediately. And I don't know about you, but I get 10 phone calls a day from, car crash people and insurance companies and life,
Yeah.
share trading, God knows what else. And as soon as I hear them start to sell, I put the phone down, because they're not interested in me. They're interested in my money.
Mm.
And if they're interested in my money and not in me, I'm not interested in them. And I think so you've got to humanize the business, and it's got to come authentically. My sort of big idea, if you like, is that business should be a beacon for nobility of spirit. It should be generous. It should be something which cares about your customer and your people who work for you and everybody. And if you have that as a culture, it's recognized because you stand out, and people are smiling more, and people are walking faster, their pulse rate's slightly faster. So business should be an experience. It should be an experience that people enjoy and have fun with. As soon as you're pushing, people resist. If you pull, they come towards you in droves. And that's the difference between success and failure in business.
Fantastic. And so notability of spirit, for you, that's about like a higher purpose? Just describe that a little bit more. That's fascinating.
Well, it's basically, in my sort of, and I'm not the most successful businessman that ever lived, by the way, far from it. But my concept is that a business should be an extension of the best part of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think about, I'm a giver, not a taker. I want people to enjoy it. I want people to enjoy the experience and the journey, because the journey we take is actually more important most of the time than the destination we get to. So I try and create an environment where actually people love working together, and you suddenly get this bond happening, a bit like actually is happening at the moment with this virus that's going around. There's all of a sudden, we are in it together, everyone's in the same boat, and we're all pulling for one another. And it's different from anything I've experienced before. Well, that's the same in a business. You can tell as soon as you walk into a reception of a business, you can see from the look on people's faces and the way the receptionist smiles or whatever, what the energy is in that business. Mm. So energy is something where if you choose the right people to work with you, you can usually teach them the technical stuff or the knowledge. What you can't necessarily teach them is the right attitude. So my philosophy was, if I can pick people with the right philosophy and the right giving attitude, then I can always mold the experiences that they can offer to the business in terms of, skills and so on. And you have a much happier life. There's nothing worse. And, it's a very lonely place being the boss of a business.
Yes,
you're up there and everyone just passes you the problem. And it's merciless because, and so my rule was, if they came to me with a problem, they had to also come to me with a solution. So that way it made them think about what the solution was before they actually just passed it on my desk.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I just want to go back a step, actually, because I know you have had a wide variety of businesses, and you're talking quite a lot about service there. So just in a kind of, you don't have to go through every single one, but just give us a couple examples of some of the businesses you've been involved in, because I just think that'd be helpful for our sort of context, if you like.
Well, they're pretty varied. So my first business, believe it or not, was a bodyguard business. And because I lived near Aldershot, where all the Paras lived.
Oh, right. I used to study near there. I used to study down the road in Farnham.
Oh, well, that's where my house was, in Farnham.
Yeah.
So anyway, and a friend of mine was in charge of security at the Playboy Club in the days when Arabs would turn up with suitcases full of money.
Yeah.
And so the first business with my brother was hiring Paras to be bodyguards for these Arabs. We used to have cars behind and cars in front and escort them through and so on. And that led us into the security business. And then through that, someone sent us a fiber optic torch for looking at the underside of cars being inspected. And we sort of had a look at fiber optics, and we were the first people into fiber optic security, because you can't bypass light. You can bypass electricity. So we had a little machine downstairs going clunk, clunk, clunk. And we used to get phone calls from, the American security companies saying, can you quote us for the Alaskan pipeline? Which is 26,000 miles. So we used to roar with laughter, because it was we had this, no money, but we had this idea that was very big. So that led us into licensing. So we actually licensed it after a long time and so on. We thought we were going bust, and we went right to the edge of the abyss. We eventually sold it to Pilkington Brothers, the glass people who made fiber optics. Mm. And so so at 24, I went from having holes in the soles of my feet, of my shoes. I walked out the room on paper, quite well off.
Yeah.
So then I was employed for a bit. And
so how long did you have that business? What was the duration in years?
That was, the patents went in about 1977, and we sold it in 1980.
Okay, so about 3 years.
So it's about 3 years.
That's pretty rapid.
And Oh, we were pretty. We gave everything. In those days, I was fearless.
Mm.
Put everything on the line, and my brother and I were very sort of synergistic in what we did. So we always called it. He was the accelerator, and I was the brake, and I'm not a very good brake anyway. So it was like, we went hell for leather at it.
Because you
And
mentioned
then,
we a lot. So we was you and your brother primarily.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
So, well, my dad, who made an absolute fortune of the hula hoops. I mean, we
Yeah.
were brought up in enormous sort of.
Did he patent
privilege,
that?
really.
How did he protect it? Because it'd be very easy for someone else to make a piece of plastic.
Well, he made it. I mean, it was a craze that lasted 6 months. So it wasn't time for anyone else to copy it, really. We just made them. We sold about 15 million of them in the UK in
Wow.
6 months, and then that was it. But my dad, unfortunately, lost all his money. So my original plan to retire when I was 18 didn't quite come off because he blew it all. And so all of a sudden, I thought, oh my God, I've got to do something. So we did that, and then by chance we got involved after the fiber optics company. We got involved in filtration papers, and we invented the super absorbent fibers.
So how did you get there? How did you end up?
Because all the time there's ideas coming across, you see,
Okay.
and the thing is, it's not that single idea; it's linking one idea to another.
Yeah.
So they were using super absorbent granules in nappies and things like that. But we thought, wouldn't it be great if you could actually weave it into a fiber? And so we invented the meat pad that you get underneath your chicken and your beef. And we sent a little pad of this super absorbent stuff with one of those baby drinking bottles, full of water that was sealed at the top. And we sent instructions to every food company. We said, right, open the package, take the water, put the pad on your desk, pour the water on, and watch what happens. And the pad just absorbed all the water, and it feels dry, and it's all gone. So within 4 months, we were specified by every major food company as the supplier of their meat pads. So all the packaging companies had to buy our meat pads. So we went from nothing to making about 40 million pads a week in our factory. And again, so we just... So
I want to break that down a little bit more. So, okay, got the idea. You then got together some, LC experts in material technology, or whatever we should call that, to come up with what's effectively your prototype. You delivered that prototype as a kind of marketing tool to prospective customers through the post, and that's what led to. And then you had to go and build a factory pretty damn quick. Then,
well, we had a factory already doing other stuff. We had a paper conversion factory, right. So we're converting papers and stuff, but we were doing fairly standard products where there's no margin. So again, the other advice I would give to anybody who's starting a business is don't devalue the product. If you're going to put all that thought and make it special and extraordinary, charge a price which allows you to market it properly and advertise it and gives you something to get behind you. So the meat pads, we used to make an 83% gross profit on it. So it was very profitable business. So every time we had a clunk on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's in that type of industry. I mean, in service industry, it
was unheard of.
Yeah, in that's like I say, absolutely unheard of.
Yes,
it's usually fractions. Yeah.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Yeah. And then that got us into medical packaging, and then anyway, I sort of had a midlife crisis and thought I've had enough. I've been working. I used to get up at 5 a.m. and finish 11 at night, and I was pretty much knackered, to be honest. I was so tired.
I've always known you, Neil, as a super energetic guy. I always think of you as a teenager with what's the word? ADHD, is it?
I've got ADHD.
I do.
Yes, I've got most of it. I haven't got obsessive compulsive, but I have got ADHD. Okay. And so I've always got at least 5 ideas going on in my head. So as long as you know that, you're probably, you're okay. You can sort of put a brake on yourself. But so I sort of retired and had a midlife break. Then I got rid of my house and changed wives and God knows what else. And so
I don't go too deep down there. It's a different show, but was that just out of bored with what you was doing, wanting something different from life, or just the pain of the energy of having to work so hard for so long?
It's just that I guess one of my philosophies is I want my life to be absolutely full of everything, and it was only full of one thing, which was work and making money. And so it was, I had everything you could almost possibly want, a lovely house and nice cars and everything. And I sabotaged it because I thought I've got to make it exciting again. I've got to start from nothing. and I've got to do it. So I changed the whole lot, and I went off around Brazil and South America, and I bought a house in Brazil and did all the crazy stuff. And then I got bored, and I rang up a friend of mine, and I said, do you want to start a business? And he said, yeah, sure. So I said, what do you think the future is? And they said, well, bandwidths are expanding so much on Wi-Fi that there is interactivity on the internet. So again, I sat down, I thought, well, how can I make it more interactive and more appealing to people using the internet? Which led to the hologram style presenters on websites, where I could literally take any website and just put my little person on there saying, come this way or follow me or whatever you wanted to say.
So for people that aren't familiar with that, what I remember of that is, you'd have a traditional looking website, and maybe you've got a little video panel there, which the user would normally expect to hit play, but someone would literally walk on to the video from the side, and it worked particularly well, or it seemed to me at least to be particularly appropriate to people that are using themselves, selling themselves, be it a coach or a consultant or something, so they could.
Well, people deal with people. So normally, if you think of a normal website, it's mostly text. So you'll see a few pictures, and maybe if you're lucky, a bit of video, but normally you get text and pictures. So if you have someone walking on and in 30 seconds gives, if you like, the elevator pitch for what you're trying to do, first of all, you're developing a relationship with the customer online because they're seeing a person as opposed to just text. And you can actually then link the videos of the presenter to take the customer anywhere you want on their website. You can do special offers, and you can do special effects, and goodness knows what else. So I only wanted a small business, really, and a friend of mine was the editor of of High Life magazine for the British Airways.
I know High Life very well.
Right,
I did the first EasyJet magazine.
Oh, did you really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, what started me going really on this thing was I got an article on me and this invention, and it got put in all the first class cabins on British Airways. Yeah. So all of a sudden I had Procter and Gamble and British Gas and all the boss had been in the plane and said, this looks interesting, get one. And so as a tiny company, I went from, nothing to having, I suppose we did about 50% of the FTSE 200 companies making videos for them. And then what happened there was it suddenly took off, and we're doing really quite well. And then of course technology leapfrogged me because the tablet came in and the mobile phone came in, and so my thing only worked on a laptop. So all of a sudden I was without a business, having built it up. So I had to change the emphasis of the business into being like an advertising agency. And for the last 8 years, I've had a team of techies developing the technology so it works on every device and every browser. We just literally just got there.
Well done.
So I'm launching that as soon as this bloody virus thing finishes. Then I'll be pushing that and licensing it, hopefully around the world.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think it's a very stimulating thing, business. And so it's change all the time. It is literally changing all the time. And so as soon as you rest on your laurels, as soon as you think you've made it, you're on the way down. So you have to think about which new relationships you have to make, what the direction of the technology is going, what are your threats? Because there's more threats than ever now, in terms of competition and where the market's appearing and disappearing. So it's a tough thing. And the trick is to make it fun as well as being tough.
I want to also jump back to something you said right near the beginning, actually. You talked about this tingle. You said, I think, you literally had this tingling sensation in your fingers. And although I can really relate to that, but I've taught myself not to get excited, which seems to be at odds to yours. So my thoughts were, when that used to happen to me, again, I think of myself as an ideas person, get this great idea, middle of the night or whenever it was, get super excited, want to, jump up and rush in. And it was usually a new industry, right, which I knew nothing about. And I knew nothing about, but it was just such an exciting feeling, you almost didn't care. And now as I'm a bit older and a bit longer in the tooth, I do consciously hold myself back. Actually, Simon, damn squiddly squat about that industry. Go and do some homework first, which invariably does diminish the excitement factor a little bit. Do you go through that kind of due diligence, or you just go, let's figure it out and we'll worry about everything else later?
I think you have to go through due diligence. I mean, otherwise you're going to end up so many blind alleys, especially if it's an industry you don't know. I mean, I've been in plastics, paper, chemicals, security guards, And so all those different industries. So I came in pretty naive about all of them and green. And so you have to look, it's a classic thing. But the good thing is that there's virtually nothing new under the sun. So especially with Google nowadays, you can research virtually anything.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at the competition very easily. You can you can have networks on Facebook and LinkedIn and so on that will help you, guide you in terms of how you develop the product and what they really want. So, the most important thing is if you're not getting applause, you're doing it wrong. So when you put something out there, the applause might come in orders or money or different forms. But if you're not getting a response, it's not them it's wrong, it's you. So you have to do something different. And then perhaps, hopefully, you'll get the applause. And, when you watch some of these sort of Dragon's Dens and so on, they're totally convinced they have the best genius idea. And everyone's saying, no, you haven't. You're risking your house. Don't do it. And they're just plowing on regardless. And they end up in total misery because they haven't listened to what the world is telling them. So the world gives you clues all the times about success. So people are saying, well done. They're turning up to your meetings. They're coming to conferences. I always used to get, I don't know, when I was doing anything really, there used to be the normal kind of leads, but there'd always be some really exciting ones in there, really juicy ones, which could be game changers. So game changing is another word I think you've got to have in your vocabulary, is what is the thing that's going to happen or could happen to your business that is a game changer and that will turn you into the next level of business or person or whatever. And so you've got to be firm in your commitment and your enthusiasm, but flexible in your learning and your ability to change.
Yeah, I think there's a phrase, have a clear vision in mind and be very flexible about how you get there. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. So
it's a special thing. I think, to me, most of the time the press are giving business people a hard time because they see, chairmen of companies who are making losses, taking millions of pounds out in bonuses. That's the horrible side of business, and I disagree with it completely. But the heroes to me are of any country really are the entrepreneurs, because it's a very hard thing to have the courage to put your money where your mouth is. It takes you at least 3 years usually to get any kind of return. You're the last person in the queue to take money out. Mm-hmm. Everyone's, so it's there's no mercy for you. And if you do make it, then everyone's queuing up to take it off you, taxman and everybody else. So I think the philosophy about business needs to change, in that people who have the courage and the commitment to start businesses, which are the lifeblood of any economy really, are the heroes, and they should be appreciated. And they're not at the moment. People would rather become lawyers because it's not considered, or accountants or whatever, or stockbrokers or whatever, because it's not considered honourable to come up with something which makes a profit. But it's only the profit that keeps any economy going. Yeah. And it's a good word, profit, but it's not considered to be a good one at the moment because they think of the pigs at the trough.
Yeah, and I think what I see as an entrepreneur, of course, they're critical, essential, and I do think it's completely underrated. I think one of the reasons entrepreneurs are increasing is there are no more sort of jobs for life. I don't think there's even industries for life anymore. I mean, my background is in design. Used to do graphics for print. So I do big billboards, magazines, adverts, CD covers, blah, 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 blah. And I loved that industry, actually. And if probably a different version of my life, I would have stayed there. But some idiot invented the web, came along, and I was like, oh, that is absolutely a game changer for my published industry I was in at the time.
Yes.
I don't think that there are even industries for life anymore. And as such, I think there's a lot of challenges owning a business around all the things you've covered there. However, I think normal jobs are becoming increasingly challenging themselves. Go back 20, 30, 40 years, you probably could have a job for life or close to it. You certainly could have an industry for life.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stability, and there's a lot of benefit. It's lovely to know that you're going to be able to pay the mortgage next month. And sometimes in business, that's a challenge.
Yes.
Things happen. Your audience can get wiped out overnight with a competitor, etc. So yeah, there are definitely challenges there, but you've got to kind of grab hold of the positive side of it as well. I've seen a lot of people.
Well, you always exchange one thing for another. So you work for somebody else. most places, there's always somebody in an organization whose job it is to make your life hell. And so I've always had one. Every business I've only worked for other people for maybe a year in my whole life. I've always been fired within about 3 or 6 months because I'm insubordinate. But there was always politics. There was always someone there to stop you achieving your dreams. They weren't thinking about what the best thing for the company was. They were thinking about whether you'd overstep your pay grade or
your little area, yes,
your little step. So it's nice to work for a company, but most people, I think my guess is if you ask 75% of people, if you said, are you happy in the company you work for? They probably say, well, I'd rather work for myself. But the company always pays you just enough to cope with the frustration, just enough so it's more comfortable paying the mortgage, knowing you can put food on the table and doing all that, rather than suddenly being out there in the big savage world, trying to rely on exactly what your dreams are and create this thing, which is going to be blood, sweat and tears. So it's a difficult one. And, luckily I came up in an environment where that was part of the culture. Is my dad started from nothing and did pretty well for a while before he blew it all. So my whole thing was being risk. I'm a poker player. I play backgammon. I've always been a punter.
Yeah.
But I gamble on things where there's an element of skill, where at least I've got a slight edge, and it's not just not sticking a pin into a piece of paper.
Yeah, well, I'm really interested you stumbled across that, actually. I'm quite glad you did, because actually, you really remind me of my dad, actually. And I'd consider both of you. Pardon?
At least it's not your grandfather. That's good.
Both what I consider real natural entrepreneurs by just sort of spirit and etc. And he's a gambler as well. And I'm not a gambler. My mum was like, the one thing my child is not going to do is gamble, because my dad was a gambler, fairly big time. And if my mum was looking for her husband, my dad, she would phone up the snooker hall first and then phone up work, in that order. So, and I think I whatever they did or she did, it worked. I've never really touched gambling. It's never really been a pull for me. But I kind of think I'm missing out. I suspect there's actually a skill there, and actually seriously thinking about going into it. And I wonder if we're sort of missing out. And gambling is a skill, right? I mean, understanding when to walk away from hands.
Well, it depends what sort of gambling. So if you're talking about roulette, stick away from it, because you cannot win, because it's literally just statistics.
Yeah.
But if you're so business is a gamble. If you start a business, it's a gamble. And so I think 90% of businesses disappear within 3 years of starting up. So you're a 10% chance of making it. If you're one of the average ones. If you take poker, it's 30% skill, 70% luck. So, but that 30% is a hell of an edge over everybody else. I'm not a very good poker player, by the way, because my face gives everything away. I get an ace, I start smiling.
I know you're more of a backgammon guy.
I play backgammon because that's a different strategy and tactic every time you throw the dice. So it's very analogous to business or life, because it's when to go forward, when to retreat. Where are you? Is your timing right? What's your opponent's philosophy? So you have to assess all these things every time those dice are rolled. So it's incredibly good brain exercise. Much better than poker, by the way. So I played those since I was 17. And it was a brilliant way of sort of giving me the right philosophy. And so if you know you're right, if you make the right decision, if you play perfectly, sometimes you might lose and be playing perfectly because the luck will be against you. But if you've done it as well as you possibly can do, the chances are you'll win in the end over a long period of time. And that's the same in business. There's nobody who has successes all the time. You have little failures. And then from those failures, you learn. And usually when you make a hard decision, it's usually a productive decision. So the ones that you lose sleep over, once you've said, okay, that's the right thing to do, it's probably not the easiest thing to do, and you make that decision, then all of a sudden you find the business kicks into another gear and you get to the next level. And then you hit a plateau where again you hit the same sort of problems and so on, and then you make another hard decision and it moves up again. So it's a constant review of what are you doing, and it's looking at the world trying to look at the world without filters. As soon as you put a filter in front of you that makes you see things in a certain way, you're missing the possibilities over there because you can't see them. So if you look at the universe as it is and facts as they are, and what applause are you getting, and who's supporting you, who's toxic to you, and then make the decisions, then life rewards you. You know, one of the things just generally is, I've got a piece of paper and I drew a line down the middle of it, and I put down on the left-hand side were people who support me, people who I know want me to succeed, and give me feedback, which sometimes very tough, but they comes from a place of love and support. And on the other side, I've got toxic people, people who would enjoy seeing you fall, people who enjoy you having a failure or something not working for you. And those toxic people, I resent the amount of time I've spent with them in my life, because now they're out. I don't touch toxic people, because all they do is they take energy from you, they break your own confidence, and they just waste your time. So pick the right people to be with, pick the right people to work with you, and create a culture of working with rather than for.
Yeah, I mean, just hold on to that sort of gambling story a little bit. What I suspect, so I'm not a gambler, is that particularly with guys, being a little bit sexist here, there's a lot of bravado. Let's say it's a local game of poker, small stakes, no big deal. There's definitely a huge amount of testosterone in that room, a lot of bravado. I'm going to smash you, blah blah blah. Especially guys, you know what we're like. And if you're gambling for a little bit more money, I guess you have to learn to take that emotion out and take the humiliation of a defeat and make the right decision, walk away from the hand when it's right time to walk away, say no to the Dublin dice when it's offered to you if you're in a position that...
The analogy is, right, let's suppose you get two kings in your first two cards. Mm-hmm. You've got a very, 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 the second best hand you can have in poker, right? But one of the best sayings ever is never fall in love with a pair of kings, because someone could have an ace and an ace could come up on the next card. So what you do is you use your chips, you use your money, you use whatever it is to get information to find out what the other person has. So if you bet properly, the information they give you from their betting tells you exactly what their cards are, or the likelihood. So if the next three cards, there's an ace in there, and you put a sizable bet in, and they call that bet or raise it, they've probably got an ace.
Well, they're representing, aren't they?
Representing they've got an ace.
Yeah.
So now they might not have, they might be bluffing, but in my experience, not many people, bluffing is not as common in poker as everyone thinks it is.
Interesting.
So you're using information all the time to work out how solid your position is. Exactly the same in business, because there's always something about to change out there. There'll be a new competitor. When we had the fiber optics idea, within 6 to 9 months, we probably had 5 or 6 competitors. When I had the video idea of the hologram, within a year, there were probably 20 competitors around the world. So, people jump on ideas very, very quickly, especially if they think there's money there. So patents aren't the thing that they're going to protect you. Is speed to the market is going to protect you. Is getting out there quickly and getting it seen and having the advantage of being the first to the market. If you rely on your patents, you're barking up the wrong tree, because it's incredibly expensive defending a patent. It takes ages and ages to have it granted.
They're effectively ineffective, aren't they? I think these days.
Unless you're a Johnson & Johnson or one of these enormous companies that got a drug, for instance. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, I won't go through it here, but if anyone wants to know about patents, I know a lot about them. It's you're blowing money, which you could be spending on developing and marketing, on something which is going to sit in a file and never be used.
And do you attempt to protect, a new element, a new service, a new product, heavily through branding? I always feel that if you come up with a new version of hula-hoops, so the hexagonal hula-hoops, if you're the first person to get there, okay, that's an advantage. But if you can come up with a sexy name and get that name out there, then you'll always be seen as a market leader, even when the copycats come along. Is that something you've actively tried?
I mean, branding is very, very important. It depends where you're positioning yourself in the marketplace. So some people position on branding and some people position on price. Mm-hmm. So if you are, for the sake of argument, 30 or 40% cheaper than somebody else, and you are doing your own label for somebody or whatever it happens, you just make the stuff and it just comes off the production line and off it goes. But if you want to protect a position in the marketplace for a long time, you build a brand. I had a particular brand of paper. Believe it or not, one of my inventions was the udder wipe for cows. When you milk a cow, you have to wipe its udders. And so there were, at the time in the UK, we had 2.5 million cows. It was a lot of paper.
Yeah.
So I invented this particular kind of paper, and it was called Super Dry, funny enough, a bit like the clothing company.
Yes.
And anyway, it was before the clothing company, actually. I was the first person to have that brand name. And the cows loved Super Dry. And I had people copying me with exactly the same product, as it happened. But because they didn't have the name and the cows loved Super Dry, that's what they stuck with.
Yeah.
And I used to lie in bed.
So that was the brand name, is it? The cows love Super Dry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, I supplied virtually every agriculture merchant in the UK with all their udder wipes for cows. And then I came up with an udder mint, a cream for udder the cows. So they used to get mastitis. So they used to get this cream. It was very warming, and you rub it into the udders, and it would keep them in perfect condition. And they loved, and I had a picture of a smiling cow having the stuff rubbed in its udders. So, it was funny. We used to roar with laughter about it.
Yeah.
But I used to bring in container loads and container loads of paper. And then at one time, I was called in by one part of Unilever.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, they'd seen one of the wipes I did. And they said, we want to have a wipe for Marks and Spencer's to clean all their shelves, food shelves. Can you do this? I didn't have a clue how to do it, but I said, of course I can. And I walked out of the office with an order for £1 million for this stuff as a starter. And I had to find the product, find the dispenser, find the chemical. But most of my life, I've sold something in anticipation of having it ready. And when you get the order, it's a tremendous kick up the bum to get it ready. Yeah. And so I made this, and I sold container loads and container loads every month for cleaning all the shelves of Marks and for years. And I never saw it. It used to come from Finland, used to arrive into Hull, get distributed to Marks and Spencer. I never had to touch it or see it. All I had to do was invoice the customer, and the paper company invoiced me.
And this was effectively an evolution or an extension of, what did you call it? Meat pads. Meat pads have come beforehand.
We used to sit down and have how many things can we invent in half an hour, just for fun? Yeah. So we'd come up with paper air fresheners, where you have, a paper that absorbs an air freshener, and as it absorbs it, it turns into a flower, and the flower changes color when the air freshener is exhausted. Yeah. We came up with the meat pads. We came up with medical packaging. So if you're transporting blood and it broke in transport, it would be absorbed into the actual packaging and sterilize it. So once you take the blinkers off, mm-hmm. The answers are usually underneath your nose. There's so many things that you can be doing to extend it. You think now of the way they're expanding a brand like, let's say, Mars. In the old days, you had the ordinary Mars bar. Now you've got Mars ice creams. You've got little Mars little appetizer chockies and individual wrappers. You've got, all sorts of Mars cake and everything. So once you've got the basic idea, then once you've got that market and the money is flowing, you've got distribution, then you come up with a second product, and the second product ends up making more money than the first product did. Then you come up with a third product, but it's about timing.
You've got that credibility. You've got those links, you've got relationships.
Yes.
You've already harnessed.
See, the other thing, for anyone who's listening, by the way, has got an idea, is when you get it going, hang on to it for as long as you can to get it to a stage where, because many people say, well, I'll license it or I'll sell it. They think a basic idea, they can license the idea. You can't license an idea. You can license a product. Mm-hmm. So what big companies are good at is distribution. So they've got all the distribution channels, they can get to thousands of outlets, and the volumes will go through the roof. But they're terrible at innovation. Mm. So it's down to the small people like me to come up with the ideas and develop them to beyond prototype into a production model where the market's proven where it's going, and then you say, right, now we'll license it to you. You'll get your 3 or 5% or whatever it is licensing fee, and then they will get distribution in every continent and all parts of the world. One of the products we did was a wet wipe for windscreens called Screenies. I don't know if you've seen them, but you pull the label back and you take a wet wipe out, and then the label reseals. Well, I invented that pack, and so we had this thing, and I was doing it. We got it, we made it, we're making 100 here, 200 there. We started marketing this thing, and they sold 8 million in the first 3 months.
Wow.
And it was so successful. I sold them the machines to make it in their own factory. So it became, and that sold turtle wax. It became, and then I went to J&J and I said, you're only selling wet wipes for babies at the moment. How about surfaces? So I was the first person to actually disinfect surfaces using wipes in a resealable pack.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden that took off. And then of course, once you get a couple of reference points like that, everybody, all the doors open and they want it. I'll tell you a very satisfying story if you like. I'm sorry, I'm probably going a bit too.
No, that's good.
But we used to have a meat company. When we first came up with the meat pad, the absorbent meat pad, I used to ring this chap up who was the buyer for a meat producer. And he treated me like dirt. He used to say, look, he said, when I want your product, I'll tell you, stop ringing me and I'm not interested and just, forget it. He was so rude and unhelpful. And so anyway, when we sent the sample to the actual supermarkets and they tried it and they specified us, they had no option but to use our meat pads. And this chap rang me and he said, all right. He said, I've decided I'm going to use your product. I'd like to place an order. I said, I'm sorry, there's a 3-year waiting list. And he lost the contract with Marks and Spencer's.
Ouch.
So the moral to that story is be nice to people on the way up because you never know. They could come back at you later on. So one of my more satisfying moments in life.
Yes. I wish I had a story. I used to work with Mothercare, was one of our buyers. And they used to treat, at least us, as not very nicely. And
yes.
I imagine they were the same as with every other supplier as well, actually. And just, crazy demands. And I'm not talking about just being hard on price, etc. Just, abusing their position. And
sure.
So it's not nice to see people do that. It's interesting to talk about, you're absolutely right about big business being just useless at innovation. And there's lots of reasons why. It's hard to turn Titanic on a dime, right? Actually, one of the other chats and podcasts with Stuart Lloyd was a fascinating chat. He's really into innovation. Talk about evolution of ideas, and we stumbled across Sturgeon's law, which just talks a bit about what you just talked about, which is basically that quantity of ideas is one of the best ways to get to a good one. So, you said earlier on, just coming up with lots of ideas. You gave yourself half an hour to come up with as many ideas as possible. And just that kind of freedom that comes from those exercises can be incredibly valuable and productive.
Absolutely.
I feel that, my background in design, I think I've said probably a couple of times, and with my designer's hat on, in an ideal world, I'd like to think I can just craft this on the drawing board and get it absolutely perfect. But in reality, it's much more about iterations and evolution. And I feel like ideas are like a jagged piece of rock. And you chip away at it until it ends up becoming a beautifully smooth pebble. But you've got to hit it 100,000 times with pitches and markets and test it and investigation and critical examination of it. And it slowly, and then when it gets that pebble shape, it flies, it travels through effortlessly, the communication's smooth, and everything happens a lot easier.
Yes.
So any words of wisdom? Let's say someone was in a position where they're effectively starting a business for the first time. Maybe their business or industry has effectively gone, imploded. A lot of people are in a position where they're, let's call it heavily pivoting. You talked about sort of relationships. Would you start trying to build a community first? Would you dive straight in with kind of brainstorming and product iterations and ideas? If you were starting for the first time now, how would you go?
Well, there's a good story, which I think you probably know as well. I think his name's Richard Reed, who started Innocent Drinks.
Oh, yes. Yes, I do know.
He was at a festival. And so they're making smoothies at the festival. And they had 2 bins. And one said, if you think we should start a company to make this stuff, put the bin in, put the bottle in here. And if you don't think we should, put it in here. And they ended up with this enormous bin full of people saying, yes, make these smoothies, and we'd buy them. So that's a very simplistic idea, but you've got to get people's reactions honestly. The trouble is, if you ask your friends and you say, what do you think of this crap idea? They'll say, it's absolutely amazing. But they haven't put their money out. So you need you need good friends who are honest enough to tell you the bloody truth. So you need people who can say, no, it's rubbish, or it needs changing, or I wouldn't buy it. Because the biggest test, when you're asking people to get money, every penny that you ever make is in someone else's pocket now.
Yeah.
So would they spend their money giving it to you for that product? So you need a really good community around you to tell you honestly whether it would work or not. And then from there, go step by step, test it. And if you've got a good idea, because especially at the moment, it could be a fantastic time to start a business because interest rates are so low.
Mm-hmm.
So people who've got money don't necessarily want to put it in the bank because they can't get any interest on it. They're much better off investing in really good ideas. So develop the idea so you've got something which looks real, even though it doesn't exist yet. Every imagination, everything you can see, realistic. The biggest problem with business plans is they're always over optimistic and they're at 10 million in 2 years. It doesn't happen that way. So, get a good bunch of people behind you. Get people who can give you honest feedback, even if it's not good, and then take it step at a time. And don't, if you can, try to avoid putting your house on it, just in case. I mean, try and find other. There are plenty of people who invest out there. There's lots and lots of investment money, especially with stuff, the raising money online and all this stuff now. So get a good bunch of people with you who've got skills that you haven't got.
Yeah,
so
I've just got a couple of people really that when I come up with a new idea that I kind of go to, and they're unlikely to know anything about the industry I'm, come up with an idea in, but they've got that right, and that energy set. I don't know what it is that they can say just honestly, not harshly, their thoughts, and it doesn't mean you actually even need to take their advice, but it's genuine feedback, and it's always valuable. And so Simon, I'm not getting that. Great, it seems obvious to me, it makes sense to me, but honestly, Simon, I'm just not getting it. It's like, oh, okay, great, thank you. I really needed to know that. You need to go away, do some homework, and come back. I know some people do a lot of surveys and things. I'm like, it gives me zero feedback, or zero valuable feedback. In my eyes.
It's interesting because a lot of the time when you speak to someone who's got an idea for a business, they're incredibly defensive. So if someone says, look, I don't think it would sell at the moment or whatever, they'll say, well, I think it would because of this. So what they should do is listen, say, thanks very much for the feedback, and ask someone else. So it's quite possible the feedback's wrong, but if lots of people are giving you the same feedback, the chances are it's right. So not to be defensive, but to absorb it and say, is this right or not? And again, it's to do with being flexible enough sometimes to know that you're wrong and to accept that you're wrong. But then when you're right, to have the confidence to pursue it to the end. You need perseverance because it will not be easy. Even if you've got the perfect idea and everything absolutely in line, it is a heavy lifting period that's going to exhaust you. You're going to go to bed sometimes, feeling lousy. And it's a test of your character. And that's why people who build their own businesses usually are a bit special.
Yeah, I mean, I find business hard. I believe business is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think the most rewarding thing from business is it's the most hardest thing I've ever done. So, there is a benefit from doing something that is really taxing and demanding. I'm learning, I still learn every day. As I'm not a particularly young guy anymore, I still find it stimulating. And yes, there's challenging days, but I couldn't work in a 9 to 5. That's just not. It would kill me. It would literally.
You're a classic example of an entrepreneur. I've always looked up to you as someone with lots of ideas and much cleverer than I am. You understand things I haven't got a clue about. I mean, there's a lovely story. There was a wonderful poet called Maya Angelou, and she was a black lady who was basically the daughter of slaves, and a terrible, everything you can imagine happened to her. And she wrote this beautiful poetry. And she's being interviewed, and they said, well, how come someone who has such a seemingly terrible life can write these beautiful things? And she said, well, if you take a lump of coal and put enough pressure on it, it turns into a diamond. And so the ultimate personal development course is business, because you have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to have self-esteem, self-confidence, belief in your ideas, perseverance, enthusiasm, communication, everything which you would deem valuable as a human being, you have to have in your armory if you're to succeed in business really well. So I think it's an amazing thing. And that's the beauty of it. Yeah. Because isn't it a great thing at the end of the day to stand top of the mountain with your team and say, look at what we did?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good story. It's really good to hear you say that. I feel like when you see people on stage accepting their reward or maybe picking up their gold medal at the Olympics and they're crying, those tiers are because they've spent 100 times those many tiers in the gym, in training,
Absolutely.
and that's just 1% of the tiers they've gone through to get there, and they've
Yes.
really earned it. So look, Neil,
Yes.
I think that's probably a good place to kind of end this. It's been a real joy to have you on this this interview. I'm sure people get great value out of that. If somebody wants to connect with you and learn a little bit more about you, where can I direct them?
Well, my email is Neil, Neil dot Davidson Neil Davidson 53 at gmail.com. That's my personal email, so they email me.
Okay. Now,
And
you're okay with me
want,
sending out a personal email, or is there a
I
better
love
method?
I love helping people. I mentor people. I love it. I love supporting people who want to succeed, and I'll do as good a job as I can, as it were. I don't want a full-time job. I'm pretty much retired now, but I will always give advice and try and help where I can. So do contact me. Thank you very much for inviting me, Simon.
No, absolute privilege. Thank you, Neil. All the very best. I hopefully chat to you soon.
So that was Neil Davison. I think you'll agree, Neil clearly has huge passion and energy for business, and I hope you got some value out of that. In our next podcast, we have none other than Michael Clark, who'll be joining us. We're talking about various aspects of business. He's involved in Dent, which is now a global organization, really helping people accelerate their business, basically a business accelerator organization. And he's Aussie, and he's based in Brisbane. He heads up the Brisbane wing of that company. So look forward to speaking to him soon. Come and join us on that podcast. That's it from me. Over and out. See you on the next one. Bye for now.